The world fades into stillness as you begin to drift. Whispers beneath the smoke. Life in Dark Age Britain. The wind drifts low over the misty hills of ancient Britain, carrying the scent of smoke and damp earth. In the hush before dawn, a village stirs, its thatched roofs gleaming faintly with dew, its people waking not to an alarm, but to the whisper of wind and the bleating of goats. This was life in Dark Age Britain, a world dimly lit by hearth fires where time moved slower than breath, and each sunrise felt like a small miracle. The houses were humble, built from mud and timber, their walls trembling when storms rolled across the valley. Inside, the air hung thick with smoke from the hearth, curling into the thatch above. Floors were dirt mixed with straw, patched with animal dung to keep the cold from seeping through. It was not beauty that defined these homes, but endurance, the quiet will to stay warm, to survive one more season of rain. People slept close, families and animals sharing the same small space. The smell of hay, sweat, and life filled the night. Comfort was not a blanket, but the warmth of bodies, the soft snort of a pig, or the faint clatter of a chicken shifting in its corner. Outside, the wind sighed across the moors, a constant lullaby of the living and the lost. Morning began with the taste of ash and grain. They ate pottage, thick, coarse and honest, a spoonful of warmth against the chill. No sugar, no spice, just the flavor of survival. Water was rarely trusted, so they drank ale, mild, safe and simple, brewed by hand in wooden vats that smelled faintly of bread and smoke. The first sip was comfort, the second, courage. Work followed the rhythm of the land, hands in soil, backs bent to wind, hearts steady with the hum of the day. Men mended fences and turned the earth. Women brewed, cooked, and spun thread. The world was measured not by clocks, but by sun and shadow. Days began with light and ended when it left. Between them stretched the slow grace of labor, mud on boots, calluses on palms, and a tired kind of peace. The air was thick with the scent of manure and hay. It was the smell of living close to what fed you, of accepting the earth as both friend and burden. Rain was constant, soft as a sigh, then fierce as a blade, yet the people did not curse it. They moved with it, learned to read its moods like a familiar face. Evenings were quieter. Smoke rose from hearths pale against the deepening blue. Inside, voices murmured, stories curled like smoke through the rafters. They told tales of kings and warriors, of spirits and shadows, of men who never returned from the sea. Outside, the night stretched wide and black, stars pricking the dark like secrets too small to hold. The rich lived differently, but not comfortably. Their halls of stone echoed with draughts, their feasts heavy with meat and pride. They wore fine wool and furs, yet the cold still found them, slipping under doors and through dreams. To be noble was to be admired but not spared, from fear, from illness, from the slow decay of time. The poor had little, yet their laughter carried further. Around fires they shared ale and stories, swapping hardship for humor. Their joy was brief, but it was bright, burning quick as kindling in a dark world. Winter was the true test. The land slept beneath frost. Food grew scarce, but even then, fires burned, hands clasped. Songs were sung low and slow. There was beauty in that resilience, a quiet, stubborn grace that outlasted hunger, filth, and cold. Life in Dark Age Britain was not gentle, yet it was real. It was the pulse of survival wrapped in smoke and mud, a heartbeat echoing against the grey of centuries. They did not live for glory, they lived because the world even in its cruelty, was still worth waking up to. History often feels like a dream half-remembered, a voice calling faintly from the fog of time. To step into the centuries after Rome's fall is to walk through that mist, where the world feels both fragile and eternal. Britain, left adrift without its empire, became a patchwork of small lives, villages stitched together by toil and weather, people who endured more than they conquered. It was not a time of grandeur, but of persistence. Stone crumbled, fields overgrew, and yet humanity did not fade. The rhythm of life slowed into something elemental: dawn, labor, dusk, sleep. There were no maps, no clocks, only the cycle of rain and harvest. The grandeur of the past had vanished, but in its place bloomed something quieter, an intimacy between people and the earth that sustained them. Their world was small yet full, the hum of bees in summer fields, the hiss of logs on wet nights, the sound of footsteps on muddy roads that led nowhere and everywhere at once. In that simplicity lay the secret of endurance, the art of surviving without wonder, yet never without heart. To remember them is to remember what it means to live humbly, to feel the earth beneath bare feet, and to keep walking, even when the road dissolves into mist. Whispers beneath the smoke. The homes of dark age. Britain. The morning rises gently over a sleeping valley. Mist clings to the grass, a soft silver blanket laid across the world, and from within the folds of that silence, a thread of smoke begins to climb. It drifts upward from a thatched roof, curling and fading into the pale sky, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and slow-burning wood. Inside that home of mud and timber, someone stirs, a quiet rustle, a sigh, a world waking not to the tick of time but to the murmur of nature itself. These were not grand houses, they were shelters built by hand, born from patience and need rather than beauty. The walls were shaped from packed earth, reinforced with timber beams that creaked softly when the wind pressed too hard. The roof was a heavy quilt of straw, browned by smoke and age. When rain fell, it whispered against the thatch like fingers tracing a lullaby. When storms came, the wind found its way through every crack and seam, and the people huddled closer to their fires, breathing warmth into the trembling dark. There were no chimneys, no neat escape for the smoke. It gathered inside, turning the air thick and dusky, curling around beams and rafters like ghosts that refused to leave. The ceiling was low, the walls darkened with soot. Every breath carried a taste of fire, every cough a trace of ash. Yet to them this was comfort. Smoke meant heat. Heat meant life. The floor was the earth itself, tamped down with care, covered with straw, patched with clay and dung. To modern minds it sounds harsh, but the scent of it was the smell of survival. A hearth at the center burned all day, fed with wood, peat, or dried manure, casting an amber glow across the faces that gathered around it. Shadows danced along the rough walls like soft, uncertain memories. People slept on piles of straw, sometimes covered with animal hides, their breath mingling with the steady rhythm of livestock nearby. Goats shifted in the corners, pigs snorted softly, chickens murmured in their dreams. The warmth of beasts and people became one. It was not luxury, it was necessity. On nights when frost crept through the valley, the bodies of animals were blankets, their presence a heartbeat of warmth in the dark. To live in such a house was to live inside the world, not apart from it. The wind was not a thing outside your walls, it was a companion, a sound that moved through your nights. The rain was not an interruption, it was a rhythm. The smell of smoke, of straw, of sweat, of damp earth. These were the perfumes of existence. Light entered gently through cracks in the walls or through the open doorway when the morning came. It spilled across the floor, revealing the traces of life, footprints hardened in dirt, a half-empty bowl of grain, a wooden comb, a sleeping dog. There was beauty in those simple things, quiet and unassuming. In the evenings, the house became a cocoon. The glow from the fire flickered across faces tired from labor, the air heavy with warmth and breath. The walls, so humble by day, turned golden under the dancing flames. Children leaned against their mothers, eyes half closed. The old ones spoke in voices low and even, telling stories of the day, of weather, of the slow, eternal pulse of the land. It was a small world, but not an empty one. Every sound mattered, the pop of a log, the creak of a roof beam, the sigh of wind slipping beneath the door. Each note was familiar, a reminder that one was alive, that life persisted, even when comfort was scarce. Outside, the world waited in its grey stillness, mud paths, quiet fields, and the far-off cry of a nightbird. The stars above were clear and close, the sky deep enough to swallow every worry. In such a home, time was not counted, but felt. Days unfolded like threads of smoke, soft, fading, endless. It was not wealth or glory that defined them, but endurance. These homes were monuments not of power, but of persistence. They bent under storms filled with smoke and noise, yet somehow remained standing. They held within them laughter, hunger, love, and loss, the ordinary weight of existence. And perhaps that is why their memory lingers. Even now, if you walk through the green hills of Britain and listen closely, you might hear it. The faint hiss of rain against thatch, the whisper of wind through an old timber wall. The past has a way of breathing softly, reminding us that comfort was once the color of firelight on an earthen floor. There is a strange peace in that image, a kind of serenity born not from ease but from acceptance. To live then was to live with the elements, to listen to them, to yield without surrender. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind was a conversation. The home was never just a shelter. It was an echo of the earth itself, warm when it could be, unyielding when it must. Life inside those walls moved gently, even when hardship pressed close. Smoke drifted in lazy spirals, and the world beyond seemed far away, softened by mist and time. It was not the grand comfort of kings, but the quiet comfort of belonging to one another, to the land, to the rhythm of living. And when night deepened and the last ember glowed low, silence settled like a blanket. Outside, the wind wandered. Inside, the air still shimmered faintly with warmth. They closed their eyes, not in fear, but in weary peace. The dark was not an enemy, only a deeper kind of rest, the soft light of morning, daily life in dark age Britain. The sun does not rise all at once. It unfurls slowly, spilling light like honey over the damp hills and sleeping fields. Mist clings to the thatched roofs, and the world wakes without sound. No bells, no clock, only the steady rhythm of breath and the quiet conversation between wind and grass. A curl of smoke lifts from a crooked chimney hole, thin and silver, spiraling into the pale sky. Inside, a fire is coaxed to life, and another day begins. There are no alarms here, no sudden bursts of noise to tear the stillness apart. The light itself is the signal. A mother stirs beneath a rough blanket, her hair tangled with the scent of ash and hay. She stretches, her body remembering the shape of labor before her mind does. Beside the hearth, the embers glow faintly. Her hands move with practiced ease, feeding the coals a few dry twigs until the room blushes with warmth. It is not comfort in the modern sense. It is survival, pure and simple, and somehow more honest. A man wakes next, his breath visible in the chill air. He pulls on boots stiff from yesterday's work, the leather cracking softly. Outside, the ground is wet, the soil cold beneath his soles. He squints toward the horizon where the fog swallows the trees. The silence feels heavy but not empty. It hums with life unseen. A sheep calls somewhere in the distance. The sound carries gentle and far, as though even the animals know to speak softly at dawn. Breakfast is plain, humble, and essential. A bowl of pottage, oats boiled with water, perhaps thickened with barley, or a handful of peas. It smells faintly of smoke and grain. Steam curls upward like a ghost of yesterday's fire. They eat slowly, not to savor, but to prepare. The taste is dull, yet kind. It fills the stomach and warms the chest. A wooden cup holds a weak ale, light and safe, brewed by hand to chase away thirst without danger. Water from the stream could make you ill. Ale, at least, is faithful. There is no conversation at first. Words are saved for the fields, for the long hours ahead. The house creaks softly, its wooden ribs shifting in the wind. A child yawns, the dog near the door lifts its head, ears twitching. Outside, the pale sky grows brighter, touching the tops of the hills with gold. The day has arrived, though without ceremony. They step out together, the man toward the fields, the woman toward her chores. The morning air smells clean but sharp, filled with damp earth and the faint sweetness of wood smoke. Each breath is visible, a ribbon of warmth fading into the cold. The land stretches out before them, wide and brown and alive. The soil is heavy from rain, clinging to boots, to tools, to hands. It gives nothing freely, yet it is the only constant they know. The rhythm of the day is measured not by time, but by motion. The swing of a hoe, the drag of a plough, the soft grunt of effort. The sun climbs slowly, indifferent to their labor. Backs bend, shoulders ache, and still the work continues. It is a language of endurance, spoken without complaint. To work is to live. To pause too long is to fall behind. In the village, smoke rises from other roofs. Women tend fires, mend torn cloth, grind grain between stones. Their hands are busy, quick, sure. The sound of work is its own kind of music, the scrape of wood, the whisper of a broom, the bubbling of something cooking over flame. A few words pass between neighbors, light and brief, a comment on the weather, a small laugh at a child's mischief. Then silence returns, companionable and soft. Children scatter like birds, their laughter bright against the muted world. They chase one another through mud, their feet bare, their cheeks flushed with cold. Their joy is wild but never aimless. Even play is a rehearsal for labor. One day soon they will carry water, feed animals, mend fences, but for now the morning belongs to them, fleeting and free. By mid-morning, the sun gains confidence. It warms the fields, softens the air. The smell of soil and sweat begins to mingle, sharp and real. A farmer wipes his brow with the back of his hand, looks up at the sky, and says nothing. There is satisfaction in the ache of muscles, in the steady repetition of need met by effort. No one here asks for luxury. They ask only for enough. When the hunger returns, it is answered simply. A crust of bread, perhaps a slice of cheese, if fortune has been kind. They eat where they stand, leaning on tools, eyes half closed against the brightness. The bread is coarse, the cheese sharp, the ale lukewarm. Yet it is enough to carry them through the rest of the day. Hunger is not an enemy. It is a companion they have learned to live with. The hours slip quietly past. The sun moves, the shadows turn. The fields hum with the sound of insects. the faint rustle of wind. The world is small here, but full. Every leaf, every grain of soil feels immediate, sacred in its simplicity. There is no need to chase meaning, it exists in the act of living itself. By afternoon, fatigue sets in like a tide. Movements slow but never stop. The earth gives back little, but always something. A promise of bread, a whisper of hope. Sweat mixes with dirt, streaking faces that never expect to stay clean. And still they work. Not because they must, but because it is all they know and all that is required to greet the next morning. As the sun lowers, its light softens into amber, turning the thatched roofs to gold. The village exhales, men return with tools slung over shoulders. Women stir pots that release the comforting perfume of grain and smoke. Dogs bark lazily, chickens rustle into corners, the air smells of firewood and coming rest. Inside, the hearth burns brighter now. Its glow paints the walls with flickering light, turning shadow to warmth. They sit together again, eating from the same bowls, drinking from the same cups. The food tastes of earth and effort, and that is enough. Conversation drifts like the smoke itself. Unhurried, gentle, never urgent. A laugh here, a sigh there. The day folds in upon itself, neatly, without regret. Night creeps in quietly, wrapping the world in soft darkness. The wind moves through the cracks in the walls, whispering against the straw. The fire dims, its last embers glowing like hidden stars. They lie down where they woke, bodies heavy with honest fatigue. The silence is full, but never lonely. It is the sound of peace, earned through effort. There are no dreams of glory here, only the slow comfort of rest. Tomorrow will come, as this day did, with light over the hills, and smoke rising to meet it. The same work will wait, the same hunger, the same gentle pattern of breath and motion. It is repetition, but it is also rhythm, a heartbeat passed down through generations. This is what morning meant in Dark Age Britain. Not the rush of beginnings, but the slow unfurling of endurance. A dawn that did not promise ease but offered another chance to exist, to move, to belong to the earth. Each sunrise was both an ending and a renewal. Each day a quiet act of courage disguised as routine. And so the cycle continued, soft as a song sung without words. The world turned, the fire burned, and the people of that age lived not in haste, but in harmony, with the soil, with the wind, with the light that slipped tenderly through the cracks of their humble homes. If you listen closely beyond the centuries, you can still hear it, the murmur of morning, the scrape of spoons in wooden bowls, the soft exhale of breath rising with the smoke. It is the voice of the past, unhurried and kind, calling us back to the gentle rhythm of simply being alive. Quiet rhythm of work. Labour in Dark Age Britain. The morning begins not with the call of machines, but with the whisper of wind through low thatched roofs. The sky is pale, a soft stretch of grey that promises neither kindness nor cruelty. A man stands at the edge of a field, his breath visible, his hands already rough from seasons that have passed the same way before. Around him, the land lies heavy with dew, the soil dark and waiting. This is his world, measured not by hours, but by effort. The first sound is the creak of wood, the slow drag of a crude plough, pulled by an ox whose ribs show faintly beneath its hide. The tool is rough, its edge dull, its handles splintered from years of use. Still it works, the man pushes forward, each step sinking into the soft earth. Behind him, the ground parts like a sigh. The rhythm is steady, strain, release, strain again. In this rhythm lives his purpose. Nearby, another figure stoops low to gather hay. Her fingers move through the stalks with practiced grace, each handful tied with twine and laid aside. The sun climbs higher, the mist burns away, and the smell of damp grass rises sweet and heavy. They do not speak much. They have learned that silence saves strength. Only the faint murmur of breath and the rustle of movement mark the passing of the hours. Tools are few and none of them kind. Iron is precious, wood wears down quickly, and the handles split with every season. A hoe blunts before the harvest ends. An axe loses its bite long before the trees give up their wood. Repairs are constant, and improvisation is survival. To work in Dark Age Britain is to make peace with imperfection, to coax life from what is broken, to move forward even when every step feels like surrender. The work does not end with the fields. There are fences to mend, walls to patch, thatch to bind before the rain returns. Mud becomes mortar, straw becomes thread. Each task folds into the next, forming a life not of moments, but of motion. The air hums with small noises, the scrape of a spade, the dull thud of wood meeting earth, the steady breathing of animals that share the labor. In the barns, the smell of hay and dung thickens. Men shovel, rake, and carry, the weight of the day pressing into their shoulders. The sweat that gathers on their skin mixes with soil until there is no difference between man and land. And perhaps that is the quiet truth of their existence. They belong to the earth as much as it belongs to them. Women, too, labor with quiet endurance. They patch floors with fresh clay, scrub soot from walls, churn milk into butter, twist wool into thread. Their hands are never still. Even in rest, they are mending, weaving, preparing. Work moves through them like breath, unseen but constant. There is no division between labor and life. The two are one. Injuries are common and often ignored. A cut on the hand, a twisted ankle, a burn from the fire, these are not misfortunes, but companions. The body learns to heal without help, to carry on with scars that tell no stories because everyone bears them. A serious wound is feared not for its pain, but for its interruption. Rest is luxury. Survival does not pause for pity. The reward for such endurance is simple: to end the day still standing, unbroken. In a world where medicine is as rare as mercy, to escape injury is to win. When the evening comes and the tools are set aside, there is a quiet satisfaction that hums beneath the fatigue. No celebration, no triumph, just a small exhale of relief. The measure of success is survival itself. The fields, though harsh, hold a strange beauty. When the wind moves through the tall grass, it ripples like water, soft and endless. The workers stand for a moment, backs aching, eyes following the motion. There is peace in that sight, a reminder that the world continues whether they toil or rest. The land is eternal, patient, indifferent, yet somehow kind in its constancy. As the day stretches, the sun sharpens and sweat trickles down the curve of a spine. The rhythm of work becomes a kind of trance, the body moving without thought, guided by habit, older than memory. To work the earth is to enter its slow language, to speak without words, to understand through touch. Each stroke of the hoe, each turn of soil, each lift of the hayfork is part of a conversation that has never truly ended. When hunger comes, it is met with little, a hunk of bread, a sip of ale, perhaps a handful of berries picked from the hedgerow. The meal is taken standing, the pause brief. Hunger is expected, and the satisfaction of easing it feels more like duty than pleasure. They eat as they work, quietly, steadily, without complaint. Sometimes accidents happen. A A slip of the blade, a fall, a sudden crack of bone. There are no healers to summon, no salves or bandages beyond cloth and hope. The injured are tended by family, their pain folded into the rhythm of the day. A limp becomes part of one's walk, a scar another line on a map of endurance. No one is untouched by hardship, but few are undone by it. As the light fades, the fields glow gold beneath the dying sun. The workers gather what they can before the cold returns. Tools are carried home, heavy and dull, hands raw from friction. The path back is quiet, conversation is rare, replaced by the soft sound of footsteps through grass. The horizon bleeds orange, then red, then finally slips into blue. Inside the homes, firelight flickers against walls streaked with soot. The smell of earth still clings to them, the taste of sweat not yet forgotten. They sit by the hearth, bodies sore, hands idle for the first time that day. The flames move slow and steady, mirroring the beat of their hearts. It is in this moment, the pause between labor and sleep, that the world feels most still. There is no talk of ambition, no dreams of escape. Tomorrow will bring the same toil, the same aches, the same quiet victories, but tonight there is warmth, there is rest, and that is enough. They do not call it courage, this endurance, they would not even call it strength. It is simply what must be done. Yet beneath that simplicity lies something noble, a quiet defiance, a refusal to yield. The land takes much, but it never takes their will. The night deepens, cool and wide, the fire burns low, the smoke rising in lazy curls toward the roof. Outside, the wind hums across the empty fields, carrying with it the faint echo of a day's worth of effort. In that sound is the story of a people who worked not for glory, but for life itself. And when they sleep, they dream not of riches, but of rain that falls kindly, of soil that softens easily, of mornings that come gently. In their dreams, the tools never break, and the body never aches. But even when they wake to the roughness of reality, they do not despair. The dawn will come, the fields will wait, and their hands will rise again. This is the melody of labor in Dark Age Britain, slow, steady, and unadorned. It is the hum beneath history, the heartbeat that outlived kings and empires. For all the centuries that followed, the memory of their work remains, the quiet rhythm of survival, the song of hands that shaped the land and asked for nothing more than another dawn to greet them. The shape of time, perception and memory in Dark Age Britain. Time in the Dark Ages was not a line, not a clock, not a number you could write down and measure. It was a breath, a season, a rhythm moving quietly through the bones of the world. There were no calendars on the walls, no bells to divide the hours. People woke when light returned, worked while it lingered, and slept when darkness fell. Their days belonged not to schedules, but to the slow pulse of the earth beneath their feet. The sky was their only clock. Dawn was a pale whisper, dusk a soft farewell. The sun's height told them when to sow, when to harvest, when to rest. They did not name the days, they lived them. A storm or a birth or the death of a cow could mark a year more clearly than any number ever could. The year the river froze early. The year the roof fell. The year the field gave too little. These were their calendars, woven from memory, not ink. To live in such a world was to exist inside the weather, to breathe in step with it. Rain, frost, wind, these were not inconveniences but companions. When the first buds opened, it was time to plant. When the geese flew south, it was time to store grain. Each change carried its own whisper of instruction. The seasons did not pass, they circled, gentle and eternal, like a song with no true ending. Their world was small, the village was the center of everything, the known universe contained within its fields and forests. Beyond it lay mystery, names of other places carried by traders or wanderers, faint and far like rumors told in another tongue. Most people would never travel more than a few miles from where they were born. To them, the horizon was not a promise, it was the edge of the possible. The path from one home to another was a kind of thread worn into the ground by countless footsteps. It led to the well, the field, the neighbor's door. These were the roots of their existence, as familiar as their own hands. Roads beyond those paths belonged to others, strangers, soldiers, travelers, whose faces would vanish with the dust of their passing. Without books or parchment, knowledge was carried in voices. Stories were not written but remembered, shaped by the tongue and softened by time. Around the fire at night, words became the archive of the people. They spoke of harvests and storms, of loss and laughter, of things that had happened long ago, or maybe only yesterday. The line between memory and myth was delicate, often invisible. Truth was not fixed, it lived in the telling. The old would speak slowly, their voices deepened by smoke and age, while the young listened, wide-eyed. Through such telling, history flowed like a quiet river, winding and reshaping itself with each retelling. The stories were not meant to be exact, they were meant to endure. The world before writing was not less intelligent, only softer, more human, built upon trust in memory rather than the permanence of words. In such a place, forgetting was as natural as remembering. Events faded when the people who held them in their minds were gone. A death unspoken became a silence, a season unlived became a blank space between rains. Yet even that forgetting had a strange beauty. It allowed life to remain light, unburdened by the weight of too much past. Time moved differently then. It did not rush, it drifted. It was not chased or wasted, only lived. A day's work could stretch endlessly yet vanish without measure. The future was not planned but awaited, like a returning bird whose exact hour no one could name. Each dawn was both new and familiar, each dusk a quiet surrender. There were no birthdays, no anniversaries, no counting of years. Age was guessed by the strength of one's hands, the color of one's hair, the number of harvests one had seen. To be old was to have outlasted many winters. To be young was simply to have more to learn. Time was not something outside them, it was within them, breathed and carried, felt in the ache of muscle and the rhythm of heart. Evenings were the soft punctuation of their days. The sun dipped low, turning the fields to bronze. Work slowed, voices lowered, and the world exhaled. Around fires, stories filled the space where clocks might have been. "Remember the year the river took the bridge," someone would say, and another would nod, the image rising bright again, vivid and whole. The sense of history was intimate, personal. What mattered was not the century or the kingdom, but the small moments that shaped a village's life, the birth of a calf, the building of a fence, the first frost that stole the apples. To them, these were the turning points of the world. Empires could rise and fall beyond the hills, and they might never know or never care. Their universe was measured in footsteps and seasons, not in maps and empires. The wind carried stories from faraway lands, but they arrived like dreams, half-truths, softened by retelling. A trader might speak of cities with streets of stone or ships larger than houses, but such tales were mist to those who had never seen beyond the forest's edge. They smiled, half believing, half knowing that imagination was the greater traveler. In this quiet isolation, life gained a strange clarity. Each day was whole in itself, unbroken by the rush of future or the regret of past. To wake, to work, to eat, to sleep. These were not repetitions, but rituals, part of a rhythm older than memory. The absence of timekeeping made each moment fuller, deeper, less divisible. When storms came, the hours stretched, long and infinite. People waited them out in silence, listening to the rain hammering against wood, the wind breathing through cracks. The storm would pass, as all things did, and afterward the air would feel clean, the earth softened, the world reset. In that sense, every storm was both ending and renewal, a reminder that time, too, could wash away and begin again. Sometimes a wandering minstrel would pass through, carrying songs like maps of other lives. The villagers would listen, eyes wide, as he spoke of distant kingdoms, of heroes and battles. But when he left, taking his stories with him, the village would return to its stillness. The tales would linger for a while, then fade like mist at sunrise, leaving only their echo. To live without clocks was to be free of haste. There was no lateness, only presence. The day was enough, the night was enough. The body knew when to rise, when to rest. Even exhaustion carried grace, for it came from honest work and ended in dreamless sleep. When the stars appeared, they were not seen as symbols of time, but as lights to be admired. Some said they were the souls of the old, watching quietly. Others said they were holes in the blanket of the sky, letting heaven's glow shine through. Whatever the belief, they looked upward the same way, with wonder, not knowledge. Time in that age was not lost, it was lived. Each moment belonged entirely to those who inhabited it. The past was not written in stone, the future not feared, and the present not hurried. It was a life measured in breaths and seasons, in rain and harvest, in memory and silence. And though centuries have passed since those unnumbered days, something of that rhythm still lingers. The wind still hums through the hills, the rivers still mark their own time, and somewhere, in the hush, between sunset and sleep, the echo of that slower world still whispers, a reminder that time is not only what we count, but what we feel. The quiet fear of the dark, danger and war in early Britain. Night in dark age. Britain did not arrive gently. It slid across the land like a shadow, remembering its shape, swallowing the last traces of light until even the hearth's glow seemed too small to matter. The people of the villages knew this darkness well. It was not the peaceful kind that invites sleep. It was a living thing, heavy and watchful, full of the possibility of footsteps that did not belong. They had no walls, no armies, no promise of safety. Only the trembling circle of their homes stood against the wild. Beyond the fields, the forests began, dense and whispering. Beyond that, the sea, an edge of the world from which monsters sometimes came. They called them many names: Saxons, raiders, strangers from the north. Some arrived in boats that cut through mist like knives. Others came on horseback, the sound of hooves like thunder against the frozen ground. All brought the same message: danger moves fast, and safety is only ever borrowed. When the villagers spoke of raids, their voices grew low, not out of superstition, but memory. They remembered the smell of burning thatch, the cries of neighbors carried on wind, the heavy silence after the last scream fell away. For them, fear was not an emotion, it was a landscape, one they had learned to walk carefully through. By day, the world pretended to be calm. Men worked the fields, women tended the fires, children played in the mud, their laughter fragile as glass. But even then, everyone listened, to the wind, to the dogs, to the strange stillness that sometimes fell before trouble came. They learned to read silence as others might read words. Valuables were not displayed. The few coins, a silver brooch, a blade, passed from father to son. All were hidden deep beneath the floors, wrapped in cloth, buried among stones. Some families dug pits outside the village, secret caches covered with earth and moss. They did not speak of these places even to friends. The ground itself became their safekeeper, holding what little wealth they dared to protect. When danger drew near, they did not fight. They vanished, doors closed, fires were smothered, and families slipped into the earth, into small dugouts hidden beneath barns or behind walls of straw. These shelters were narrow, damp, and airless, but they meant life. The smell of soil filled the lungs, the sound of breathing the only thing that reminded them they were still among the living. Above them, the world could turn to chaos. Boots stomped, voices shouted in tongues they did not understand, flames crackled, the cattle lowed in fear. And then, as suddenly as it began, there was quiet. Only the hiss of smoke remained, the kind that tasted like loss. When they emerged, it was never the same village, roofs blackened, fields trampled, someone missing, someone gone. The morning after a raid felt like waking in another world, familiar but broken at the edges. There was grief, but not surprise. Death, after all, was no stranger. It lingered in every season, waiting in sickness, childbirth, hunger, and war alike. Children grew up knowing this truth early: the world could change in an hour. The people who disappeared were remembered not with tears, but with stories whispered under breath by the fire. Their names were kept alive that way, soft as the smoke that curled through the rafters. It was not mourning. It was a kind of defiance. For those who lived near the coast, fear had a sound. It was the creak of oars cutting through fog, the distant rhythm of waves breaking differently than before. Sometimes fishermen saw strange sails on the horizon, white as bone. They would drop their nets and run inland, shouting warnings as they went. Villages emptied before the first sword touched shore, but not always fast enough. The sea brought beauty, the gleam of morning light on the water, the promise of fish, but it also brought ruin. The Vikings were ghosts of the waves, appearing where they were least expected. Their raids were swift, cruel, and unforgettable. Yet even they were not demons, only men shaped by their own hungers, their own cold lands and empty tables. To those who survived them, that understanding came too late. Inland, danger had other faces. Bandits roamed the roads, desperate and hungry. Sometimes it was not outsiders who stole, but neighbors, driven by winter's cruelty. Trust was fragile. A door left open too long could mean loss. A stranger asking for bread might carry a knife instead. Still they shared when they could, for tomorrow the roles might be reversed. Violence was a language everyone knew. It lived in the swing of a club, the snap of a trap, the grip of fear in the chest. Yet it was not endless cruelty, it was simply survival. In a world without law, kindness was a risk and caution was the only armor. The men learned to fight with tools more than weapons, a pitchfork, an axe, a length of chain. They trained not for glory but for necessity. When they gathered at dusk, they spoke of the day's work, not the next raid. Talking of fear too often gave it power. So they spoke instead of weather, of harvests, of the stubborn old ox that refused to plow straight. Still in the pauses, the silence said everything. Some nights, when the wind howled across the hills, they mistook it for screams. Dogs barked, and hearts beat faster. It might be nothing, just the storm, but no one slept deeply. Even in peace, they were never far from the memory of war. And yet, life persisted. Every morning that came unbroken felt like a blessing. To see the same faces, to count the same children, to find the cows still grazing in the field, these were victories. They did not measure life by years or fortunes, but by survival. There was a strange beauty in that endurance. Their resilience was quiet, almost invisible, but it was everywhere. In the woman who rebuilt her roof from scraps, in the man who carved a new plough from the wood of a burned fence, in the child who laughed again though his toys were gone. The human spirit, like the land itself, learned to grow back after fire. At night, they still lit their fires, though smaller, though softer. They told stories not of war, but of peace, of clever tricks and gentle loves. The flames painted their faces in gold, the shadows moving behind them like old ghosts listening in. They spoke softly, not to hide, but because they had learned the value of quiet. Outside, the world remained uncertain. Raiders still came, thieves still lingered, storms still swept through. But inside the circle of firelight, there was a fragile calm, a moment when the danger of the world paused and the warmth of survival wrapped around them like a blanket. Death might arrive at any time, they knew that. But so could morning. And in the thin space between the two, they found their strength. For them, life was not about conquering fear, but living beside it as one might live beside the sea, sometimes calm, sometimes violent, always near. They did not name it courage, for it was simply what life required. Yet to us, looking back through the centuries, it feels like something sacred, a kind of quiet bravery, born not from glory, but from endurance. Even now, the wind that moves across the old fields seems to carry their memory. It whispers of fires rebuilt, of hidden treasures buried and found again, of hearts that beat steadily in the face of chaos. Their world was fragile, violent, and fleeting. But within it lived a peace that came only to those who understood how precious each breath could be. The fragile breath. Medicine and illness in Dark Age Britain. Morning light drifts through the fog like a pale whisper, touching the damp ground where a village sleeps in uneasy peace. Beneath the quiet, sickness lingers, a shadow that never leaves for long. In this age, life and death walk side by side, their footsteps soft, their paths inseparable. To wake without pain is a kind of blessing. To end the day still breathing is a small miracle. There are no hospitals here, no white walls or clean sheets, no scent of antiseptic or steel. Only the earth, the fire, and the uncertain hands of those who try to mend what the world breaks. Healing is a craft built from patience, superstition, and the whispers of the natural world. The healers, called by many names, feared as often as they are trusted, move quietly through the smoke and mud, carrying baskets filled with herbs, bones, and hope. Their tools are simple, almost ancient. A pot of clay for mixing salves, a blade darkened by use, a pouch of herbs dried by the hearth. They work not with precision, but with instinct, guided by the murmurs of memory and the patterns of the moon. To them, the body is part of the same earth they till. It wounds, it heals, it decays, and then returns. When fever comes, they gather leaves of willow and mint, grinding them into paste. When infection creeps through a wound, they pack it with mud to draw out the rot, praying the earth will forgive what it has taken. When blood clots too soon or too slow, they let the leeches drink, their small bodies pulsing gently as they feed. To the healer, nothing in nature is too strange to be tried. The only sin is inaction. Pain is an old companion in this world. It sits beside the cradle and follows into the grave. A toothache can grow into madness, a splinter into a death sentence. There are no antibiotics, no sterile bandages, only the mercy of chance. The villagers learn early not to cry out too much. They grit their teeth and wait for the pain to dull, or for sleep to come, whichever arrives first. When sickness spreads, it moves like a fog through the village. First one, then two, then 10. Coughs fill the air, low and wet. The healers move from home to home, their baskets lighter each time, their eyes heavier. They boil water for steam, crush herbs into poultices, rub fat from animals into the skin to warm the blood. Some recover, many do not. Death, when it comes, is quiet. Just another sound the night learns to carry. For women, the risk of dying is as familiar as the act of living. Childbirth is both miracle and peril. The midwives work with steady hands, whispering comfort while sweat beads on their brows. They have no instruments, no safety beyond their skill and their faith in the body's stubborn will to continue. Sometimes it is enough. Sometimes the crying stops too soon. In such moments, the village holds its breath. The fire burns low and the silence stretches long. There is grief, but also acceptance. Death is not unexpected here. It is woven into the fabric of each day. Children grow up with it close enough to touch, old enough to name. They learn early that the body is fragile, that life hangs on threads too thin to see. Still, the people do not despair. They are too busy living to mourn for long. When illness takes one, the others tend the living, feeding, mending, planting. They honor the dead with action, not stillness. To stop would be to invite the same fate. So they move forward, carrying absence like another tool, another scar. There is wisdom in their suffering, though they would not call it that. They know which plants soothe, which roots cool the fever, which leaves stop the bleeding. They speak to the forest as though it listens, asking for cures, for comfort, for permission. Sometimes a remedy works, other times it kills. But they keep trying, guided by the quiet belief that the earth, cruel as it can be, still wishes them to endure. The healers themselves live on the edge of suspicion. Too much success, and they are seen as witches. Too much failure, and they are blamed for the deaths they could not prevent. Yet they continue their work, not for glory, but for necessity. Theirs is a labor of hope, a fragile, flickering light in a world that understands darkness all too well. The body betrays easily in this age. A simple cut can bloom into death within days. A cough can drain the breath from lungs before spring returns. The cold steals the old and the young alike, creeping through the cracks in the walls, turning fingers pale, lips blue. The people wrap themselves in wool, huddle close to the fire, and wait for morning, unsure if it will come. There are no clean lines between life and illness here, only shades of strength of will. A man can work the fields one day and lie still the next. A woman can sing in the morning and fall silent by nightfall. The healers say that death moves like wind, unseen, unpredictable, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel. And like the wind, it cannot be stopped, only weathered. Yet within all this fragility there is a strange grace. The people do not rage against their mortality. They accept it, live beside it, even find beauty in its honesty. To them, death is not a thief, but a guest who always arrives when the meal is done. It is sorrowful, yes, but never senseless. Each passing is part of the great turning of the world, as ordinary as the fall of rain. In the evenings, when the coughing fades and the night deepens, the villagers sit by the hearth, speaking softly. They share stories of those who were lost, not as ghosts, but as reminders. The laughter of the dead echoes gently in their voices, a fragile bridge between what is gone and what remains. The healer listens, her hands still stained with the day's work, her heart heavy yet quiet. She knows tomorrow will bring more pain, and she will answer it again, with herbs, with hands, with the same quiet courage that has carried her this far. The average life is short, 30, maybe 40 years if fortune is kind, but within those years there is fullness. The measure of a life is not its length, but its presence. The smell of rain on soil, the warmth of a fire shared, the laughter that survives even when breath does not. They live fiercely, tenderly, without waste. Each sunrise is earned. And so the healer walks home beneath a moon pale and thin, her basket empty, her steps slow. The air is cool and smells faintly of damp grass and wood smoke. In the distance, an owl calls, a soft, mournful sound that feels like prayer. She pauses, looks up and smiles, though no one sees it. Tomorrow will come. There will be pain again and work again, and maybe, if the earth is kind, one more life saved. In this fragile age, medicine is not science. It is faith in small miracles, in the resilience of flesh, in the quiet mercy of the world. And though death comes often, it never quite wins. For every loss there is another child born, another seed planted, another fire lit. Life, stubborn and wild, keeps breathing, even through the sickness, even through the sorrow, even through the centuries that have long since buried those who once fought to stay alive. And if you listen closely, beneath the hum of time, you can still hear it. The faint, steady heartbeat of their hope, pulsing softly in the dark. The scent of the earth, cleanliness and bathing in Dark Age Britain. There is a kind of quiet that settles before dawn, the still air that hangs above the fields, the slow curl of smoke from a dying hearth. In that stillness, a woman stirs water over a small fire. Steam begins to rise, thin and uncertain, curling like ghosts against the roof of thatch. This is no luxury. It is one of the few moments of cleanliness she will know for weeks. In the Dark Ages, to bathe was not habit, but event. Water was not drawn on a whim. It was fetched from wells, carried in buckets heavy enough to bend the arms. Cold water bit like teeth, and warm water demanded firewood too precious to waste. When warmth was won, it was shared. A family might take turns over the same basin, the same clouded pool of heat. The first bath was a pleasure, the second a compromise, and the third, well, it was only better than nothing. Soap was not soft nor scented. It was made from the ash of burned wood and the fat of slaughtered beasts, a bitter mixture that smelled of smoke and animal. It cleaned, yes, but harshly, leaving skin raw, hands cracked, and the faint sting of lye clinging long after. When rubbed through hair, it burned the scalp and tangled the strands until they were more straw than silk. But they used it still because there was little else. The people did not bathe to feel fresh. They bathed to scrape away the layer of earth and toil that clung to them like a second skin. The water darkened with the color of work, soil, sweat, soot, all the dust of daily living. To be clean was not to be perfumed or polished, but merely to breathe again without the weight of grime. Clothing, too, told stories of endurance. Wool tunics and linen shifts were worn until they could no longer hold together, patched and repatched, until the fabric was more mend than original thread. Washing clothes was an ordeal of labor, water hauled by hand, garments beaten against stones, left to dry stiff and cold in the wind. So they washed rarely. It was simpler to let the seasons do their cleansing. Rain rinsed what it could, wind carried away the rest. A faint odor always lingered, the scent of living close to the ground. Smoke, sweat, the tang of beasts, all wove together into the natural perfume of the age. It was everywhere, and because it was everywhere, no one noticed. The air itself carried it, and the people, breathing that air, accepted it as part of life. Clean and dirty were not opposites, only degrees of the same condition. Villages smelled of work, of damp earth, of bodies unwashed but alive. In the long houses, animals shared the space with their owners, their warmth too valuable to lose to the night. Straw mixed with dung beneath foot, the floor was a living thing, soft and warm, sometimes wet, always real. The fire in the center did more to mask the smell than to remove it, its smoke curling through the air until eyes watered and lungs thickened. And yet there was something strangely human in that world of earth and scent. It was not filth, it was survival. The smell of the village was the smell of life refusing to yield, of people who worked, sweated, and endured. To them this was the natural order, to be part of the land so fully that even their skin remembered its texture. Occasionally, when the sun shone warm and the rivers ran clear, bathing became a kind of joy. Children splashed in the shallows, laughter echoing across the reeds. Adults followed more reluctantly, washing their arms, their faces, their hair, if the water was not too cold. For a moment they felt weightless, their bodies free of mud and labor. But even then it was a brief reprieve. Soon enough they returned to the same soil, the same smoke, the same steady rhythm of living close to the earth. There were no perfumes, no oils to soften the air. Instead they used herbs, crushed mint, rosemary, or lavender, if they were lucky, to scent the water faintly. The fragrance clung for an hour, maybe two, before fading beneath the smoke once more. Still, for that small time, it was enough. Cleanliness was not perfection, it was a fleeting grace, a reminder that beneath the layers of labor, the body still belonged to itself. In the colder months, bathing was almost forgotten. The chill made water an enemy, and warmth was hoarded, not poured away. People wiped their skin with cloth, rubbed themselves with handfuls of straw, or simply waited for spring to return. To the modern mind it seems unthinkable, but to them it was wisdom. Better to stink and live than to freeze and die. Even so, the desire for cleanliness never vanished entirely. It lived in the small gestures, the washing of hands before meals, the wiping of faces with damp cloths, the combing of hair with carved wooden teeth. These were their rituals, quiet and unspoken, keeping some thread of grace in a world ruled by necessity. And though their bodies bore the scent of the earth, their senses were attuned differently. What we would call foul, they would call familiar. The odor of sweat was the mark of labor, the musk of animals, the promise of warmth and food. Only the smell of sickness or decay was feared, for that scent meant death had come too near. Evenings brought a different kind of cleansing. The fire's smoke drifted upward, coating everything in its grey veil. It stung the eyes but comforted the heart, chasing away insects and damp. In that haze, people found warmth and rest, the ache of the day soothed by heat rather than water. The fire was their bath, their purifier, their quiet companion in a world too cold for vanity. When storms came, the rain washed roofs, walls and faces alike. Children tilted their heads back, mouths open to the sky, laughing as the drops cooled their skin. Women left buckets outside to catch the runoff, the purest water they would see for weeks. Afterward, the air smelled clean, sweet almost, like a pause between two labors. There were no mirrors to judge themselves by, no polished glass to remind them of dirt or flaw. Their reflections lived only in rivers, blurred and shifting, never cruel. They saw themselves not as beautiful or ugly, but as alive, and in that simplicity there was peace. The body, after all, was not something to perfect, it was something to preserve. They did not chase beauty, they guarded survival. Their skin bore the marks of weather, their nails the memory of soil, their hair the scent of smoke. But their eyes shone with something deeper, the quiet strength of those who endure without complaint. And so the rhythm continued. Days of sweat, nights of smoke, brief baths that felt like blessings. Cleanliness was not absence of dirt, it was presence of life. It was the coolness of water against sunburned skin, the rare sweetness of soap that didn't sting, the laughter that rose even as the mud clung. If you could step into their world now, the first thing you would notice would not be the smell, but the warmth, the closeness of human life, lived fully without distance, without disguise. You would see faces lit by firelight, hear the low murmur of voices, and realize that this was not a world of filth, but of survival. A world that wore its labor openly, unashamed. For in that dark and dirty age, beneath the weight of soil and smoke, the people of Britain found a different kind of purity, the purity of endurance, of bodies that worked and hearts that kept beating. And perhaps in their simple way, they were cleaner than we will ever be. The quiet splendor, nobles and the wealthy in Dark Age Britain. In a land ruled by mud, hunger, and the sigh of wind through broken roofs, there stood a few places where stone met sky. Houses too grand to be called huts, too cold to be called homes. These were the dwellings of the nobles, the fortunate few who looked out over the same grey fields, but saw the world from higher ground. Their walls were thicker, their fires larger, their lives, at least from a distance, gilded with ease. Yet even within those stone halls, comfort was more illusion than truth. The manor rose from the earth like a promise, its walls made from quarried stone instead of wood and wattle. The roof, tiled or thatched, curved beneath the weight of years. Within, the air was dim, lit by torches that painted gold onto the rough walls. Smoke drifted upward in lazy spirals, escaping through narrow vents that never quite kept the rooms clear. The floors were scattered with rushes, changed only when the stench became unbearable. Beneath the sweetness of imported spices lingered the same earthbound smell that clung to all of Britain: smoke, sweat, and the ghost of damp wool. Servants moved quietly through those halls, shadows carrying trays, buckets, and the weight of invisible obedience. They kept the fires alive, scrubbed the platters, tended the horses, and bowed before those whose wealth was as distant from their own lives as the moon. For the lords and ladies of the Dark Ages, comfort was not solitude, it was built upon the endless hands of others. At the long table, under banners faded by smoke, the wealthy dined. Platters of roasted meat gleamed in the firelight, beef, mutton, pork, even venison brought from the forest. Fish, salted and smoked, shared space with loaves of coarse bread. Pitchers of ale and wine stood within reach, their surfaces sticky with spilled sweetness. The taste of spice, pepper, cinnamon, cloves was more precious than gold. These treasures came from distant lands, carried by ships and merchants who risked everything to bring a hint of the exotic to a noble's plate. The lords feasted loudly, laughter echoing off stone, knives clattering against bone. Yet beneath the sound of revelry there was always an edge of decay. The meat spoiled quickly, the air was heavy with smoke and grease, and the wine turned sour before the season's end. For all their wealth, they could not master the simplest enemy of all, time. Food rotted, breath stank, teeth blackened. Gold could buy flavor, but not freshness. Their clothing, though finer, told its own story of discomfort. Wool dyed in rare hues, deep blues, scarlets and greens, fell heavy across their shoulders. Linen, imported and precious, lined their garments to soften the coarse weave. Around their necks, gold twisted in intricate knots. On their wrists, silver and bronze gleamed faintly in the firelight. Rings adorned their fingers, each one a whisper of status. To dress richly was to be seen, to separate oneself from the masses of mud-stained laborers beyond the walls. Yet those same layers weighed them down, trapping heat and sweat, reminding them that even privilege could not escape the body's demands. The women of the noble houses shimmered with jewelry, brooches shaped like birds, pins of glass and amber, necklaces made from coins that clinked softly when they turned their heads. Their hair was oiled and braided, perfumed faintly with herbs. Yet even beauty was a fragile thing in this world. The air was too damp, the winters too long, and illness came as easily to the lady as to her servant. Beneath the silks and gold, the same pale skin burned with fever, the same lungs filled with smoke. Hygiene, though attempted, was more performance than practice. The wealthy had more water, more cloth, more perfumes, but not more cleanliness. Their basins were filled but rarely emptied. Their baths, though scented, shared by many. The same lice that plagued the peasant found home in noble hair. The same cough echoed through the great hall as through the cottage. In truth, their comfort was built of symbols, not realities. They had escaped hunger, not filth. Still their lives were bright with small luxuries unknown to most. They could read sometimes, or at least have stories read to them, tales of heroes and saints, of kingdoms that glowed brighter than their own. They owned dogs for hunting, falcons for sport, horses for pride. Their beds were layered with furs and feathers, soft beneath the weight of thick blankets. And when storms raged outside, the wind clawing at the shutters, they felt safe within their stone walls, believing themselves untouched by the world's roughness. But stone cannot keep out everything. Drafts crept through cracks, rats nested in the corners, and the cold of winter reached even into the noblest chamber. At night, when the laughter faded and the fires dimmed, they too heard the howling wind and felt its fingers trace along their spines. Wealth, they discovered, was a wall too thin to stop loneliness. Power, however, was a warmth all its own. The lords commanded men, knights sworn to their service, farmers bound to their land. A word from their lips could grant mercy or misery. To rule was to breathe differently, to feel one's heart beat in rhythm with control. And yet, even that power was fragile. Wars between nobles were constant, their alliances brittle. A friend could turn rival overnight, and a manor could burn as quickly as a peasant's hut. They feared disease as much as any villager. When fever swept through the land, it did not ask for rank. The noble who feasted one night might shiver the next, his skin hot, his lips pale. Physicians came, men with herbs, with leeches, with prayers, but death did not care for titles. The great halls became quiet then, the laughter gone, the echo replaced by the low murmur of prayers and the soft weeping of servants. In the end, wealth could delay suffering, never deny it. The noble's flesh was the same as the laborer's, his bones as brittle, his breath as fleeting. When he died, he was placed in a finer coffin, beneath a stone carved with his name. The peasant returned to the soil, the lord to memory. Both, in time, became dust. Still, while they lived, the nobles believed themselves blessed. Their banquets glittered in candlelight, Their gardens, enclosed by high walls, bloomed with herbs and flowers brought from distant lands. Music drifted through their halls, soft notes from strings and flutes, the kind that made the night seem gentler than it truly was. For a few hours, the world outside, the hunger, the cold, the unending labor, felt far away. The servants watched in silence, their eyes lowered, their hands busy. They saw what the nobles could not. That luxury and misery were not opposites, only neighbors separated by a thin door. Behind every feast was a kitchen thick with smoke, behind every jewel a pair of raw, working hands. And yet, even among the nobles, there were moments of humanity that crossed that divide. A lord might share wine with a trusted guard, a lady might give her servant a ribbon from her hair. Small gestures, fragile bridges in a world divided by birth. In those moments, for the briefest of breaths, they were all simply human, tired, mortal, yearning for warmth. As night deepened, the manor slept, the torches guttered out, and the stone walls held their silence. The lords dreamed of power, the ladies of beauty, the servants of rest. Outside, the same wind swept through the same dark fields, whispering through trees, touching the roofs of both rich and poor alike. It carried the same chill, the same song, the sound of a world that did not care for wealth, only for endurance. And so the noble life, bright as it seemed, was only another shade of survival. Their gold shone for a moment before tarnishing, their halls stood firm until they fell. Yet within those moments of splendor, between the smoke and the laughter, there was something achingly human, a fragile hope that comfort could last, that beauty could hold back time. It never did, but perhaps that hope itself was the truest luxury of all. The humble heart of the land. Peasants and common folk in dark age. Britain. Morning rises slow and soft over the hills, spilling light across the thatched roofs of small homes crouched close to the earth. Smoke curls lazily upward, carrying the smell of wood and damp straw. Here, in these low valleys and scattered fields, lives the true breath of Britain, the peasants, the farmers, the nameless souls who shaped the world not through power, but through endurance. They were the majority, the pulse beneath the surface of history. More than 90 of every 100 souls belonged to this soil. Lords might rule, kings might fight, but it was the peasantry who kept the land alive. Their hands, cracked and scarred, were the engines of survival. They ploughed, sowed, harvested, and carried. They mended roofs, dug ditches, tended livestock, and raised children with the same strength that turned the earth. Their homes were small, built from wood and mud, with roofs of straw that whistled when the wind was strong. Inside, space was shared with animals, cows, goats, sometimes pigs, whose warmth was worth more than comfort. The hearth sat at the center, fire burning low, smoke curling toward the rafters. There was little privacy, little silence, but there was life. They owned almost nothing. What they grew belonged to their lords, what they built was taxed, and what they kept was barely enough to last the winter. Payment was made not in coins, but in kind, baskets of grain, skins of milk, or the small mercy of their own labor. The noble's wealth was the peasant's toil turned into gold, and though they knew it, they worked still. The rhythm of work was the rhythm of existence. Dawn was their alarm, dusk their rest. Between those two lights lay a day of unbroken motion, mending fences, feeding animals, grinding flour, cutting wood, kneeling in dirt until the knees forgot they could stand straight. Every season had its task, every field its demand. Spring was for planting, summer for tending, autumn for harvest, winter for survival. Time itself was measured not by clocks but by labor, the bloom of wheat, the fall of rain, the coming of frost. Their food was simple, and because it was simple, it was sacred. A pot of pottage, grains boiled with whatever vegetables the season allowed, was shared by all. Bread was coarse, often dark and heavy, and meat, if it appeared, was a feast worth remembering. Ale flowed at every meal, not for celebration, but because the water could not be trusted. Its soft bitterness carried through the day like a quiet comfort. In the evenings, after the tools were set down and the fields lay hushed beneath twilight, a different kind of life began. They gathered around fires, their faces glowing in the flickering light, and the air filled with voices. Someone told stories, tales of old kings, lost heroes, or spirits in the woods. Others sang soft and unpolished, their melodies rising with the sparks. The sound was not of joy or sorrow, but of belonging. They drank what ale remained, laughed at the same jokes, teased one another gently. In those moments, the weight of the world seemed to ease. No one among them was rich, but together they owned something greater, the warmth of shared struggle, the closeness born of necessity. In the darkness, with the fire crackling and the night pressing close, they found peace. Community was not a choice, it was survival. When a roof fell, the village rebuilt it. When sickness came, herbs were shared, prayers whispered. When a child was born, everyone brought what they could. Wool, bread, a wooden toy carved from a scrap of oak. The lives of peasants were tangled together like the roots beneath their fields. Alone, they would have broken. Together, they endured. Their joys were small, and that made them precious. The sight of the first green shoots after winter. The laughter of a healthy child. A clear day of work without rain. A song sung off-key, but with heart. They celebrated not because life was easy, but because it was hard and still worth living. Holidays came few and far between, marked by feast days or the rare generosity of the Lord. On those days, the fields were left unworked and the villagers danced. The music was rough, the food meager, but the spirit bright. Feet stamped on the earth, hands joined in circles, voices rose into the sky. For a few hours, the peasants forgot their hunger and remembered they were alive. Their clothes were made from wool, spun by hand, dyed in dull hues of brown, grey, or green, the colours of the earth they worked. Shoes were simple leather, often patched, often wet. The cold bit through every layer, the rain seeped through every seam, but they wore their hardship lightly. They joked about the weather, cursed it, and carried on. Though their world was small, perhaps only a few miles wide, it was complete. Beyond the forest lay mystery, but within the village lay everything that mattered: family, food, fire, and faith in the turning of the seasons. They did not dream of escape, they dreamed of survival. And yet beneath that simple hope, there was quiet pride. The nobles might own the land, but the peasants made it live. Illness came often, and death followed quietly. A cough, a cut, a fever, any could take a life. Grief was familiar, yet it did not hollow them. They mourned, they wept, and then they planted again. The soil asked for no pause, and they gave it none. In their endurance was their nobility, the kind history forgets, but the earth remembers. When winter tightened its grip, they huddled together, their world shrinking to the glow of the hearth. The nights were long, the hunger sharp, yet even then they found reason to smile. The smallest flame, the faintest song, the shared bowl of stew. These became the anchors that held them against the dark. Children learned early the value of work and the rhythm of the seasons. They carried water, gathered twigs, watched the elders' hands until their own could repeat the motions without thought. laughter mixed with labor, and life moved on, slow but steady. To grow old was rare, but when it happened, it was an honor, the mark of a soul too stubborn for death's quiet invitation. And when those elders spoke, the village listened. Their stories were the maps of memory, the record of a people with no parchment but deep remembrance. They spoke of harvests good and bad, of winters cruel and kind, of neighbors lost and born. Their words were the soil of history, rich with truth and tenderness. There were moments too when the world felt larger, when traders passed through with tales of distant lands, or soldiers rode by with armor that caught the sun. For a heartbeat, the peasants glimpsed the wide unknown, but when the travelers vanished beyond the hills, they returned to their fields, content. The world might be vast, but their corner of it was enough. As the night deepens, the fire burns low. The villagers drift towards sleep, their bodies heavy with fatigue, their dreams simple. Outside, the stars shimmer above the dark fields. The same wind that moves through the nobles' hall brushes gently against their thatched roofs. The same moonlight softens their worn faces, and in that quiet sameness lies the beauty of their world, a world of labor and laughter, of struggle and song. They were not heroes, yet they kept the heart of Britain beating. They built its walls, tilled its soil, raised its children, and carried its future on backs bowed with grace. Their lives were small, perhaps, but their endurance was vast, echoing softly through centuries. For though history remembers kings, it was the peasants who remembered life. The taste of time, food, and the divided table. In Dark Age Britain. The day begins with hunger, soft, familiar, and patient. In Dark Age Britain, food was not a pleasure but a rhythm, a heartbeat that kept the living moving from one sunrise to the next. Every class, from peasant to noble, tasted the same air, breathed the same smoke, and drew warmth from the same fires, but what lay in their bowls told the story of who they were. For the common folk, breakfast was not a meal but a pause, a bowl of porridge thickened with oats or barley, stirred with wooden spoons worn smooth by years of use. Sometimes a scrap of honey sweetened the taste. More often, it was bland, tasting faintly of ash from the hearth. Bread followed, heavy and dark, its crust rough with grit from the millstones that ground the grain. This bread was life itself, dense enough to fill, humble enough to endure. They ate what they grew, and they grew what they could. Cabbage, leeks, onions, turnips, all came from the small gardens behind their homes, their roots clinging stubbornly to the same soil that clung to their hands. Meat was a luxury, almost a rumor. When a pig or a chicken was slaughtered, the entire village shared the feast. More often, the smell of roasting meat drifted from the manorial hall, never the peasant's hearth. For most, the only meat that met their mouths came from salted fish or the occasional rabbit trapped in the woods. Salt was treasure. It preserved what the sun could not, keeping fish from spoiling and vegetables from rotting before winter ended. Smokehouses stood like shrines, the air around them rich with the scent of herring and mackerel. The peasants' food was plain, repetitive, and sometimes barely enough, but it kept them alive. And in that survival there was a quiet kind of grace. They drank ale with every meal, mild, cloudy, and safer than water drawn from streams. Children drank it too, the weak brew keeping thirst at bay. In the evenings, as the fire dimmed, they shared what remained. A pot of thick pottage bubbling slowly, each ingredient added without measure or ceremony. A handful of peas, a scrap of carrot, a bone for flavor. When the spoon scraped the bottom, they slept full enough to dream. In the manor house on the hill, the story was different. There, firelight gleamed on polished cups and platters of pewter. The nobles dined not to survive, but to display. Their tables sagged beneath the weight of meats, venison, boar, goose, and beef roasted to dripping perfection. The air was thick with the sweetness of spice, the sharpness of wine, the laughter of those untouched by hunger. Spices came from far beyond the island, cinnamon from the east, pepper from distant lands, saffron bright as sunlight caught in dust. These flavors were gold in another form, proof of wealth, of reach, of power. The nobles sprinkled them not only for taste, but for pride. Each grain of pepper told a story of trade and conquest, each sip of wine a reminder that they lived closer to the world's bounty. Their bread was pale and fine, sieved from the best flour. Their tables carried cheese and honey, apples baked with sugar, cakes layered with fat and milk. Even the air seemed heavier around their feasts, fragrant with roasted flesh and spiced ale. Yet for all the richness there was something hollow in it, an excess that dulled rather than delighted. Food for them was theatre, a stage where wealth performed its quiet dominance. Servants stood nearby, silent and hungry, their eyes tracing the movements of the noble hands. When the feast ended, what was left, the bones, the crusts, the cooled broth, was sent down to them. Waste, for one, was sustenance for another. The class divide could be measured in crumbs. Between these two worlds stood the monasteries, their stone walls sheltering lives ruled by discipline and restraint. The monks ate in silence, their meals part of prayer. Theirs was a table of humility, fish instead of flesh, bread instead of indulgence. Their portions were plain but plentiful, lentils, beans, cheese, herbs, and always fish, salted or fresh depending on the season. For them eating was not pleasure but order, a rhythm meant to nourish the spirit as much as the body. The monastery kitchens smelled of smoke and herbs, bread baked in heavy loaves, soups simmered in iron pots, and fish dried on racks by the fire. The monks worked the same land as the peasants, tending gardens and orchards, brewing ale, grinding flour. But unlike the villagers, they ate with a kind of detachment, as if food were a necessity to be endured rather than savored. Yet even there, on certain feast days, joy crept in, a sweet tart of apples, a cup of wine, a rare meal shared without guilt. In truth, all three classes, peasant, monk and noble, were bound together by the same hunger, only fed differently. The peasant's hunger was constant, the monks controlled, the nobles hidden beneath abundance. But hunger, whether for food, safety, or grace, was the quiet engine that turned their world. The seasons decided everything. Spring brought hope, summer labor, autumn reward, and winter the long waiting. In the cold months, meals shrank, flavor faded into salt and smoke. Those who had stored well survived, those who hadn't simply disappeared from the count. By February, even the nobles' stores grew thin, and the peasants boiled bark and weeds to trick their stomachs into patience. Still, the act of eating was always shared. The poorest family would divide their bread into equal pieces, the richest lord would dine surrounded by kin and retainers. Food, whether plenty or meager, was the thread that wove people together. The bowl passed from hand to hand, the cup refilled and emptied again, the fire burning between them like the heart of their small universe. Even the taste of their meals told of their place in the order of things. The peasant's tongue knew bitterness, the tang of cabbage gone sour, the earthiness of root vegetables. The monks tasted restraint, the quiet repetition of grain and fish. The noble's tongue swam in luxury, richness upon richness, until even pleasure grew heavy. Yet all three, when the day was done, swallowed the same darkness, felt the same warmth of a fire, and dreamed beneath the same pale moon. In the market town, smells collided, the sweet scent of honey cakes, the sharp salt of cured meat, the yeasty breath of fresh ale. For a few coins, a peasant might taste what a lord tasted daily, a piece of cheese, a sliver of pork, a mouthful of something rare. And in that bite lay a fleeting illusion, that hunger could be forgotten, that class could be swallowed and dissolved on the tongue. But by evening, the illusion faded, and the world returned to its balance. The nobles retreated to their halls, the peasants to their cottages, the monks to their prayers. Each to their meal, each to their station, each carrying the quiet knowledge that life, like hunger, was never truly satisfied. And yet, there was beauty in that imperfection. Food was not only sustenance, it was memory. It carried the warmth of a mother's hand stirring the pot, the laughter of friends passing ale by the fire, the reverence of monks breaking bread in silence. In every class, in every mouthful, there was gratitude for the earth that gave, for the hands that worked, for the moment of stillness before the next day began. If you could step into that world and taste their food, it would not delight you, it would humble you. You would taste smoke and toil, patience and survival. You would taste the rhythm of centuries, slow and unadorned. And perhaps as you swallowed, you would understand that to them, food was not pleasure, not luxury, but life itself, a brief warmth against the endless cold. The warm taste of the Dark Ages. Drinks and spices of early Britain. The day began not with coffee or tea, but with ale, cloudy, mild, and humming softly with life. In the Dark Ages, water was an uncertain friend, often cloudy with mud or sickness. Ale was safer, a gentle drink brewed from barley and thyme. Even children drank it, their small hands wrapped around wooden cups, the taste of yeast and smoke already familiar. It was not about indulgence, it was survival, disguised as comfort. The ale of the peasants was thin, light, barely more than flavored water. It carried the memory of grain and the warmth of fire, but not the bite of strength. It filled the belly, soothed the thirst, and gave a small illusion of fullness when food was scarce. Brewed in low houses from what little barley or oats could be spared, it was made by women, stirred in great pots, fermented in cool corners, and shared among neighbors. The scent of brewing drifted through villages like bread baking, soft and sweet, the promise of another ordinary day. For the nobles, the same drink took on a different soul. Their ale was rich, strong, dark as polished wood, its foam thick and fragrant. Some had access to imported wine, deep red and heady, brought from distant shores at great cost. A single jug could cost as much as a farmer's harvest, yet they drank it freely, pouring ruby streams into gleaming cups. To drink richly was to be seen, to let the world know that distance and wealth obeyed one's command. The taste of the upper class was spiced with conquest. Their kitchens smelled not only of meat and bread, but of treasures too small to hold, a handful of black pepper, a pinch of cinnamon, a thread of saffron bright as sunrise. These were luxuries carried over sea and sand, traded through countless hands until they reached the tables of Britain's elite. Each grain was precious as gold, each sprinkle a quiet declaration of power. When the nobleman lifted his cup of spiced wine, the world itself seemed to shrink into his hand. The scent rose, sharp, warm, intoxicating. He drank not for thirst, but for pleasure, for memory, for the taste of something distant and rare. Yet even then, sweetness was fleeting, and the warmth that bloomed in his chest would fade with the firelight. The peasants had no such marvels. Their world was flavored by what the land offered freely. Herbs and roots gathered by hand, leaves steeped in hot water to mimic the drink of kings. Mint, yarrow and wild sage grew along the hedgerows, their scents carried by the wind. They boiled them into teas, bitter but comforting, a medicine for the body and the soul. In summer, they brewed nettle beer, green and sharp. In winter, they added honey when they could, turning necessity into something that almost felt like luxury. To them, a single sprig of rosemary was a feast of fragrance. A dash of salt, when it could be spared, turned dull stew into celebration. They did not crave excess, they found wonder in the small. The steam that rose from the pot, the faint sweetness of honey, the earthy heat of thyme, all became reminders that even in hardship, beauty survived. In monasteries, where silence ruled and prayer was constant, the monks brewed with quiet precision. Their ale was neither peasants nor nobles, but something in between, pure, patient, balanced. Brewing was their craft and devotion alike, each batch a hymn to order and care. They experimented with herbs, perfecting recipes that would outlive them, building traditions of taste that would ripple through centuries. The monks, too, prized spices, not for luxury, but for healing. They steeped cinnamon in wine to warm the blood, ground pepper to clear the lungs, mixed saffron into ointments for wounds. To them, the spice was not gold, but grace, a piece of the divine hidden in flavor. And always, through every class, the sound of pouring filled the quiet. Liquid against wood, against metal, against lips, the sound of comfort, of life continuing. Drinking was not only about taste, it was about connection, the passing of a cup from one hand to another, the shared warmth, the shared breath. It bound people more tightly than any oath. At night, when the fires burned low and the air cooled, families gathered close, cups in hand. The ale was simple, the herbs faint, but the moment was full. Children leaned against parents, old stories returned, laughter floated like sparks. The drink softened the edges of the day, washing away labor's ache and leaving only calm. In great halls, the nobles did the same, different walls, same ritual. They raised their goblets to songs of victory, their laughter echoing through stone. But outside those walls, beneath the same moon, the peasants lifted their humble cups, and in their quiet there was no envy, only peace. Across the land, drink was the great equalizer. Whether sipped from silver or clay, it brought warmth to cold nights and gentleness to weary hearts. The flavors might have been worlds apart, but the feeling, the soft ease, the brief forgetfulness was shared. If you could taste that world now, you would not find sweetness or sparkle, but something truer. The smoky comfort of barley, the faint spice of mint, the memory of hands that brewed not for glory, but for life. Each sip would carry a whisper of centuries, the breath of fire and frost, of laughter and silence. And as it slid down your throat warm and slow, you would understand how even in the darkest ages, humanity found its little lights, burning in the hearth, swirling in a cup, reminding every soul, rich or poor, that life in all its roughness could still be savored. The breath of the sky, weather and hardship in Dark Age Britain. The land of early Britain lived beneath a sky that never seemed to rest. Clouds hung low, heavy with rain, pressing close to the earth as if whispering secrets to the mud below. Days began with mist that clung to the fields and ended with drizzle that blurred the edges of the world. Sunshine came rarely, soft and fleeting, a brief visitor before the next storm rolled in. The air was always damp, carrying the scent of wet grass, smoke, and soil. The people lived by the moods of the weather, as one might live beside a temperamental friend, accepting, enduring, never expecting kindness. Rain was a constant, falling not in torrents, but in quiet persistence, soaking through wool and wood alike. Roofs leaked, fires sputtered, and everything, the tools, the walls, the people, smelled faintly of earth. The land was not cruel, only indifferent. It gave as it wished, and took just as easily. Cold lingered even in months that were meant to be kind. Wind slid through gaps in walls and sleeves, carrying a chill that settled deep into bone. Frost painted the ground white by dawn, then melted into slush by noon. The people learned to move within it, to wrap themselves in layers of rough wool, to keep their fires burning low and steady. Warmth was not comfort, it was survival, one each day anew. There were, they joked, only 3 seasons: mud, less mud, and frost. In the time of mud, roads turned to rivers of brown. Carts sank, boots stuck, and every journey became a struggle. In the time of less mud, summer, the fields offered a brief reprieve, though even then the rains could return without warning, washing away hope as quickly as it grew. And then came frost, when the world grew silent, hard, and still. The rivers froze, the air turned sharp as knives, and the fields lay dead beneath their silver shroud. Yet amid this harshness, there was a strange, quiet beauty. The mist softened the world until it felt like a dream, and the rain sang gently on rooftops through the night. The people grew attuned to the sky's rhythm, finding peace not in the absence of hardship, but in the steady pulse of endurance. They did not curse the weather. It was simply life, vast and uncontrollable, as eternal as the soil beneath their feet. The quiet breath of mortality, death and the philosophy of life in Dark Age, Britain. In the dim hush of Dark Age Britain, life was a candle flickering against the wind. Each sunrise was uncertain, each breath a small defiance against the weight of hunger, war, and sickness that shadowed the land. The people knew death not as a stranger, but as a neighbor, a quiet presence that lingered just beyond the door, waiting, patient, inevitable. To live was to balance gently upon the edge of its reach. Disease moved like mist, silent, invisible, unending. A cough could grow into fever, a wound could bloom into infection. There were no cures, only hopes. The peasants rubbed herbs into their skin, the nobles wrapped themselves in furs, the monks whispered prayers over the sick, and still the air carried its quiet harvest. To die was not tragedy, it was rhythm. The old, the weak, the very young. Each life was a flame that burned briefly, then folded back into the earth. War was another kind of sickness, louder but no less familiar. It came in the clash of iron and the smoke of villages left to ash. Men left home with spears and faith, knowing that few would return. For those who stayed behind, the waiting was a wound that never healed. The land itself seemed to breathe sorrow, fields trampled, rivers darkened, the horizon forever trembling with danger. Yet even in war, there was no bitterness, only acceptance. The people had learned long ago that struggle was as natural as breathing. Hunger, too, was constant, an ache beneath the ribs that never truly slept. When the harvest failed, when winter lingered too long, bellies tightened and faces hollowed. They stretched what little they had, boiled roots, shared scraps, and waited for the thaw. Starvation was not rare, it was seasonal, a grim visitor they had learned to endure. And through it all, they did not curse the world. They bowed their heads and worked harder, for what else could they do? To die peacefully, surrounded by family and warmth, was considered a rare grace. Most met death in the cold or the mud, on battlefields or in fevered dreams. But those who slipped away quietly, their hands still clasped in another's, were counted as lucky. For them, death was not a thief. It was a gentle hand guiding them from the noise of the world into silence. Their philosophy was simple, stripped of illusion. To live through today is victory. It was not despair. It was wisdom. They did not dream of conquering time, only of surviving it. Each sunrise was a reward, each meal a small miracle. They did not look to the far future. They looked to the next dawn, the next seed, the next fire that refused to die. And within that simplicity lay strength. Life, brief and uncertain, was lived with quiet reverence. They loved without promises, worked without complaint, and found meaning not in grand visions, but in persistence, the laughter around a fire, the warmth of shared bread, the sight of a child's smile. These were victories, soft and shining in the greyness. When death came, it was not feared but greeted, as one greets the end of a long, cold day. The people had no grand words for eternity. They believed instead in the cycle of soil and seed, in the endless turning of the seasons. To them, death was not an ending, but a return, a falling leaf carried gently back to the ground that had always been home. And so, they lived lightly, with no illusions of permanence. They knew the fragility of breath, the thin thread of warmth that bound body to world. Yet in that fragility there was peace. Life was not about how long one endured, but how quietly one accepted the truth that nothing, not even pain, could last forever. In the hush of their nights, as fires dimmed and wind sighed against the walls, they slept easily, unafraid, for in their hearts they had already learned the oldest lesson of the earth, that to live, to truly live, is to meet each dawn with open hands, and when the last dusk comes, to let go just as gently. Close your eyes and let the noise of the day drift away. The air around you softens, warm and slow, as if the night itself is breathing beside you. The world outside begins to blur, sounds fading into gentle murmurs, light melting into calm shadows. You are safe here, resting between heartbeat and dream. Imagine lying beneath a quiet sky, a blanket of stars whispering their softest secrets. Each one flickers like a thought before sleep, distant, tender, and endless. The wind moves lightly through unseen fields, carrying the scent of rain and earth. It brushes against your face like a hand that has always known you, reminding you that everything, even time, can rest. Your thoughts begin to loosen, drifting like petals on a slow river. There is no rush, no task, no weight to carry. Only the steady rhythm of your breathing in and out, a lullaby written by your own body. The world feels far away but not lost, only quiet, waiting, peaceful. Sleep does not come quickly, it arrives softly like dawn's first light on still water. Let it find you, let it wrap you in its calm, in the deep hush where dreams are born. You have done enough. You are enough. Now, rest. The stars will keep their watch. The night will hold you gently until morning.